6 years ago, I let someone walk away because I thought power meant never looking back. Today, the bank called. She's standing in my lobby, with a 5-year-old boy who has my eyes. I don't know what terrifies me more, that she kept him from me, or that she came back for a reason I'm not ready to face. What do you do when the past you buried returns with proof you can't deny? Kang Minho didn't believe in ghosts. He believed in leverage, in contracts signed in blood, in the cold mathematics of survival that had kept him alive in a world where mercy was just another word for weakness. So when his phone rang at 2:47 p.m. on a Thursday afternoon, and his private banker's voice trembled on the other end of the line, Minho's first instinct wasn't fear. It was calculation. "Mr. Kang," the banker said, his words tight and careful. "There's a situation at the Gangnam branch. A woman is here requesting access to your secured accounts. She has documentation and a child." Minho's hand stilled over the contract he'd been reviewing. The pen hovered above the signature line. Outside his office window, Seoul sprawled in all its chaotic brilliance, a city built on ambition and secrets. "What kind of documentation?" His voice was flat, controlled. "Marriage certificate. Dated 6 years ago. It's registered under your legal name." The pen fell. Minho's mind went blank for exactly 3 seconds. Then it roared back to life with a single impossible memory. A woman with dark eyes and a soft laugh. A night that had felt like a mistake he couldn't afford to repeat. A morning when he'd woken to find her gone without a trace. He'd spent weeks looking for her. Not because he'd cared, he didn't do attachments, but because no one walked away from Kang Minho without consequences. But she had vanished so completely, it was as if she'd never existed. "Describe the child," Minho said quietly. The banker hesitated. "A boy, 5 years old, black hair, dark eyes. He looks like me." Silence. Minho closed his eyes. When he opened them again, his reflection stared back from the dark glass of his desk. Sharp features, unreadable expression, a man who'd built his empire on the principle that emotion was a liability. "Tell her I'll be there in 20 minutes, he said, "and make sure she doesn't leave." He ended the call. For a long moment, Minho sat motionless in his chair, his hands folded on the desk, his breathing measured. Around him, the office hummed with the quiet efficiency of a well-oiled machine. His empire, his kingdom, everything he'd fought for, everything he'd sacrificed, built on a foundation of absolute control. And now a woman he'd spent one night with 6 years ago had walked back into his life with a child who carried his bloodline. The intercom on his desk buzzed. His assistant's voice filtered through, crisp and professional. "Sir, your 3 p.m. is waiting." "Cancel it," Minho said. "Cancel everything for the rest of the day." "Sir?" He didn't answer. He was already on his feet, reaching for his jacket, his mind racing through scenarios and outcomes with the cold precision that had made him one of the most feared men in Seoul's underworld. Marriage certificate. 6 years ago. It was impossible. He would have known. He would have remembered signing something like that. Unless he hadn't been sober enough to remember. The thought made his jaw tighten. Minho didn't drink to excess. He didn't lose control. But that night 6 years ago had been different. He'd been celebrating a deal that had cost him more than money. And the woman, he couldn't even remember her name, had appeared like a distraction he'd desperately needed. He'd woken up alone. No note. No explanation. And now she was back. The elevator ride to the underground garage felt endless. Minho's driver was already waiting, the black sedan idling with its engine purring like a predator at rest. Minho slid into the back seat without a word, and the car pulled smoothly into traffic. "Gangnam branch," he said curtly. His driver nodded, eyes flicking to the rearview mirror. "Everything all right, sir?" Minho didn't answer. His gaze was fixed on the city rushing past the tinted windows. But he wasn't seeing Seoul. He was seeing her face, fragments of memory, hazy and incomplete, dark hair spilling over pale shoulders, a laugh that had felt genuine in a world of calculated smiles, the way she'd looked at him like he was just a man, not a weapon wrapped in expensive suits. He'd let her go because she'd meant nothing, or so he'd told himself. 23 minutes later, the sedan pulled up in front of the Gangnam branch. Minho stepped out into the crisp autumn air, his expression unreadable. The bank's lobby was all glass and marble, a temple to wealth and discretion. The staff recognized him immediately. Tension rippled through the room as he walked past the tellers toward the private offices in the back. The branch manager was waiting, pale and anxious. "Mr. Kang, she's in the executive suite. Is the boy with her?" Minho interrupted. "Yes, sir." Minho nodded once. "Leave us, and make sure we're not disturbed." The manager hesitated, then retreated with a nervous bow. Minho stopped outside the frosted glass door of the executive suite. Through the translucent barrier, he could see two silhouettes. One tall and poised, the other small and still. His hand rested on the door handle. He thought about turning around, walking away, pretending this wasn't happening. But Kang Minho had built his empire on facing threats head-on, and whatever was waiting on the other side of that door was the biggest threat he'd encountered in years, not because of what she wanted, but because of what she represented, a past he'd buried, a choice he'd made without knowing the consequences, and a child who existed because of one reckless night. He opened the door. The woman stood by the window, backlit by the afternoon sun. She was different from his fractured memories. Sharper, more elegant, dressed in a tailored suit that spoke of wealth and power. Her hair was pulled back in a sleek knot, her posture radiating confidence. But her eyes were the same. Dark, unreadable. Beside her stood a boy. Minho's breath caught. The child was small, maybe 5 years old, with black hair that fell across his forehead and dark eyes that studied Minho with unsettling intensity. He wore a small blazer and pressed pants, his hands clasped in front of him with unnatural stillness for a child his age, and his face? It was like looking into a mirror from 25 years ago. "Hello, Minho," the woman said quietly. Her voice was steady, betraying nothing. Minho forced his gaze away from the boy and met her eyes. "Do I know you?" A faint smile touched her lips. "You did. Once. 6 years ago. Yes. You disappeared. I had to." Minho's hands clenched at his sides. "Why?" She glanced down at the boy, and something in her expression softened. "Because I knew what you were, what you did, and I knew that if I stayed, you'd destroy us both." The words landed like a physical blow, but Minho's face remained impassive. "Then why come back?" The woman's smile faded. "Because things have changed. I've changed." She paused, her gaze sharp. "And because he deserves to know his father." Minho looked at the boy again. The child stared back, unblinking, his small face serious in a way that children's faces shouldn't be. "What's his name?" Minho asked, his voice rough. "Jiho," she said softly. "Kang Jiho." The use of his surname felt like a brand, a claim, a declaration. Minho took a step forward, then stopped. He didn't know how to do this, how to be anything other than what he was. Dangerous, calculating, built for violence and control. But the boy, Jiho, didn't flinch. He just watched Minho with those dark, knowing eyes, as if he were trying to solve a puzzle that didn't have an answer. "You kept him from me," Minho said quietly. His gaze locked on the woman. "For 5 years. I protected him," she corrected, her voice firm. "From a world that would have broken him. You had no right. I had every right." Her eyes flashed. "You think I didn't know what would happen if I came to you pregnant? You would have seen it as a liability, a weakness, and you would have done what you always do, removed the problem." Minho's jaw tightened, but he didn't deny it. Because 6 years ago, she would have been right. So why now? he asked again, softer this time. The woman's expression shifted, and for the first time he saw something vulnerable beneath the armor. Fear. Because someone knows, she said quietly. About Jiho. About you. And they're coming for us. The room went cold. Minho's mind sharpened instantly, every instinct screaming danger. Who? I don't know yet, she admitted. But they sent me a message 3 days ago. A photo of Jiho leaving school. And a single line. The son pays for the father's sins. Minho's blood turned to ice. You should have come to me immediately, he said, his voice deadly calm. I did, she shot back. I'm here, aren't I? Their eyes locked, and for a moment, the air between them crackled with unspoken history. Anger, regret, something deeper that neither of them wanted to name. Then Jiho spoke for the first time, his small voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Are you my father? Minho looked down at the boy, at his son. And for the first time in 15 years, Kang Minho didn't have an answer. Minho drove them himself. It was a calculated risk, leaving the bank without his usual security detail, without the armored convoy that followed him everywhere. But the moment the woman had mentioned the threat against Jiho, every other consideration became secondary. The boy sat in the back seat, silent and watchful, while the woman, her name is Yuna, Minho reminded himself, dragging the half-remembered detail from the haze of that night 6 years ago, sat in the passenger seat, her hands folded in her lap with deceptive calm. Where are we going? She asked as Minho merged onto the highway, his eyes constantly flicking to the rearview mirror. Somewhere safe, he said curtly. Somewhere they won't think to look. You don't even know who they are. I will. Yuna's mouth tightened, but she didn't argue. She knew better. Whatever she'd become in the past 6 years, powerful businesswoman, independent operator, she still understood the rules of Minho's world. In the back seat, Jiho had pressed his face against the window, watching the city blur past with quiet fascination. He hadn't spoken since his single question at the bank, and Minho found the child's silence unnerving in a way he couldn't quite name. Most children were loud, demanding, exhausting. But Jiho sat with the stillness of someone who'd learned early that drawing attention was dangerous. The thought made Minho's chest tighten with something uncomfortably close to guilt. 20 minutes later, they pulled into the underground garage of a nondescript building in Itaewon. Minho killed the engine and turned to Yuna. This is one of my secondary safe houses, he said. No one knows about it except my head of security. You'll stay here until I figure out who's threatening you. Yuna's eyes narrowed. Threatening us. Us, Minho corrected, though the word felt foreign on his tongue. He got out and opened the back door for Jiho. The boy climbed out carefully, his small hand gripping the edge of the door for balance. Up close, the resemblance was even more striking. The sharp line of his jaw, the way his eyes assessed everything with quiet intensity. Come on, Minho said, his voice gentler than he'd intended. Jiho looked up at him, then slipped his small hand into Minho's without hesitation. The contact was startling. The boy's palm was warm and small, his grip surprisingly firm for someone so young. Minho's instinct was to pull away. He didn't do physical affection, didn't do softness. But something kept his hand locked around his son's. Yuna watched the exchange with an unreadable expression, then followed them to the elevator. The safe house was on the 8th floor, a sleek 2-bedroom apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. Minho unlocked the door and stepped inside, his eyes automatically scanning for threats before he allowed Yuna and Jiho to enter. It's clean, he said. No bugs, no surveillance. The building's security system is tied directly to my network. Yuna walked to the window, her arms crossed. How long do you expect us to stay here? As long as it takes. That's not an answer, Minho. He turned to face her, his expression hard. You came to me for protection. That means you follow my rules. You stay here. You don't leave without my permission. You don't contact anyone. And you sure as hell don't make decisions without consulting me first. Yuna's eyes flashed. I'm not one of your subordinates. No. Minho agreed coldly. You're the mother of my child, which makes you far more important and far more dangerous. The words hung between them, sharp and brutal. Jiho, who'd been exploring the apartment with cautious curiosity, looked back at them. His small face was carefully neutral, but Minho could see the tension in his shoulders. Yuna saw it too. Her expression softened, and she knelt down to Jiho's level. It's okay, she murmured, brushing his hair back from his forehead. We're safe here. Is he really my father? Jiho asked quietly, his eyes fixed on Minho. Yuna hesitated, then nodded. Yes. Why didn't he come before? The question was innocent, but it cut deeper than any blade. Minho felt something crack inside his chest, a fissure in the armor he'd spent years building. Because I didn't know about you, Minho said before Yuna could answer. He crossed the room and crouched down so he was eye level with Jiho. Your mother left before she could tell me. If I'd known, I would have. He stopped. Because what would he have done? 6 years ago, he'd been a different man. Colder, more ruthless, willing to sacrifice anything for power. Would he have protected this child? Or would he have seen him as a liability? Jiho studied him with those dark, knowing eyes. You're scary, he said simply. Minho's mouth twitched. I know. I bet you're not mean. How do you know? Because you held my hand, Jiho said, as if it were obvious. Mean people don't hold hands. Minho glanced at Yuna, who was watching them with an expression that looked suspiciously like grief. Go explore your room.
If you're listening to this right now, it's because this story has already pulled you in a little. But what you're hearing here is just a part of it. The full version includes 30 complete stories, no cuts. No ads, just the audio flowing while you listen. The QR code is on your screen now, or the link is pinned in the queue.
Yuna said softly to Jiho, the one with the blue blanket. Jiho nodded and disappeared down the hall, his small footsteps echoing on the hardwood floor. The moment he was gone, the air in the room changed. Minho stood, putting distance between himself and Yuna. You should have told me. I couldn't. Her voice was raw. Do you have any idea what it was like? Waking up that morning and realizing I'd spent the night with someone who could destroy me with a single phone call. Finding out 2 months later that I was pregnant, and knowing that if I went to you, you'd either force me to get rid of the baby or take him from me the moment he was born. You don't know that, don't I? Yuna's eyes blazed. You're Kang Minho. You don't do weakness. You don't do vulnerability. And a child, our child, would have been the ultimate vulnerability. Minho's jaw clenched. So you ran. You built a life without me. And you would have kept Jiho from me forever if someone hadn't threatened you. Yes, Yuna didn't flinch, because he's my son. And I would do anything, to keep him safe. Even from you. The words hit like a punch to the gut. I'm not the enemy here, Minho said quietly. Then prove it. Yuna stepped closer, her voice dropping to a fierce whisper. Prove that you're more than the monster everyone says you are. Prove that you can protect him without turning him into someone like you. Minho stared at her, his mind racing. She was right. He knew she was right. But the truth was more complicated than she understood. Because the world he lived in didn't allow for softness. It didn't allow for second chances or redemption arcs. It demanded blood and loyalty, and the willingness to do terrible things in the name of survival. And now he had a son, a 5-year-old boy who looked at him with hope instead of fear, who thought holding hands meant someone wasn't mean, who deserved a father who could be more than just a weapon in an expensive suit. I'll find out who's threatening you, Minho said finally, and I'll end them. And then what? Yuna challenged. You go back to your empire and we disappear again? No. The word came out harder than he'd intended. Then we figure out what comes next. Together. Yuna searched his face, looking for the lie. But Minho had never been good at lying to her. Not 6 years ago, and not now. Finally, she nodded. Okay, Minho echoed. They stood in silence, the weight of 6 years pressing down between them. Then Jiho's voice drifted from the bedroom. Can I watch TV? Yuna's mouth quirked in a tired smile. Yes, but only cartoons. Minho watched her walk down the hall, her shoulders straight, despite the exhaustion he could see in every line of her body. She'd built a life, raised their son, become someone formidable enough to walk into his world and demand protection without flinching. And he'd been too focused on his empire to even know she existed. His phone buzzed. Minho pulled it out and read the message from his head of security. Preliminary report on the woman. We'll send full dossier within the hour. Minho deleted the message and made a call. Find out everything, he said when his security chief answered. About her business, her enemies, anyone who might have a reason to target her or the boy. Already on it, sir. But there's something you should know. Minho's hand tightened on the phone. What? She's not just a businesswoman. She owns 3 legitimate companies, sure. But she's also been quietly consolidating territory in the import-export sector. The same sector we've been trying to penetrate for the past 2 years. Minho went still. She's a competitor. More than that, sir. She's been good, smart. No one even realized she was building an empire until 6 months ago. Minho's mind raced. Who else knows? About her connection to you. No one. Yet. Keep it that way. He ended the call and stared out the window at the sprawling city below. Yuna wasn't just the woman who disappeared after one night. She was a player. A threat. And she'd brought their son directly into the middle of a war neither of them had expected. The door to Jiho's room opened, and the boy peeked out. Are you staying? He asked Minho. Minho looked at his son, this small, fragile person who carried his blood and his name, and felt something shift inside him. Yes, he said. I'm staying. For now. 3 days passed in tense quiet. Minho came and went like a ghost, appearing at odd hours with food, updates, and a presence that filled the apartment with tension, even when he wasn't speaking. Jiho watched him with the cautious curiosity of a child trying to solve a puzzle, while Yuna maintained a careful distance, her walls firmly in place. On the 4th morning, Minho arrived with breakfast and a file. Yuna was in the kitchen, making coffee, when he walked in. She looked up, her expression guarded. I know who sent the threat, Minho said without preamble. Yuna's hand stilled on the coffee pot. Who? Jung Taeyang. The name landed like a stone. Yuna's face went pale. You know him, Minho observed, his eyes narrowing. Yuna set down the pot with shaking hands. Yes, he's been trying to acquire one of my companies for the past year. I refused every offer. Why? Because the company was the first thing I built, Yuna said quietly. After I left you, it was mine. And I wasn't going to hand it over to someone like him. Minho's jaw tightened. Jung Taeyang doesn't take no for an answer. And if he found out about Jiho, about me, he'd use him as leverage, Yuna finished, her voice hollow. Yes. Yuna sank into a chair, her hands trembling. How did he find out? I don't know yet, but I will. Minho pulled out his phone and set it on the table. In the meantime, you need to tell me everything. Every deal. Every enemy. Every person who might have a reason to hurt you. Yuna looked at him, her eyes wet. I built my company to survive without you, to prove I didn't need your protection or your power. And now you do, Minho said bluntly. So stop pretending you don't. The words were harsh, but not unkind. Yuna wiped her eyes and nodded. Okay, where do we start? For the next 2 hours, they went through every detail of Yuna's business. The contracts, the partnerships, the enemies she'd made along the way. Minho took notes with mechanical precision, his mind already constructing strategies and counter moves. Jiho wandered in halfway through, still in his pajamas. He climbed into Yuna's lap without asking, resting his head against her shoulder. "Are we in trouble?" he asked softly. Yuna kissed the top of his head. "No, baby. Your father is going to fix it." Jiho looked at Minho with those dark, serious eyes. "Can you really fix it?" Minho met his son's gaze. Yes. It wasn't a promise he made lightly, but it was a promise he intended to keep. Later that evening, after Jiho had gone to bed, Yuna found Minho standing on the balcony, smoking a cigarette. She'd never seen him smoke before, another crack in the carefully constructed armor. "I didn't know you smoked," she said, stepping outside. "I don't." Minho took a drag and exhaled slowly. "Not in 15 years. Yuna leaned against the railing beside him. What changed? Everything. He gestured at the apartment behind them. This, him, you. Yuna was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry I kept him from you." Minho looked at her, surprised. "I mean it," Yuna continued, her voice thick. "I thought I was protecting him. But all I did was take away his chance to know his father. And that wasn't fair. Not to him. Not to you." Minho stubbed out the cigarette. "You did what you thought was right." "Did I?" Yuna's laugh was bitter. "Because it doesn't feel right. It feels like I made a choice out of fear, and now that fear has come back to haunt us. Fear isn't weakness," Minho said quietly. "It's survival." "Is that what you tell yourself?" Yuna turned to face him. "When you do the things you do." Minho's expression hardened. "What do you want me to say? That I'm a good man? I'm not. I've done things that would make you sick. I've hurt people, destroyed lives, built an empire on blood and broken promises." "Then why are you here?" Yuna challenged. "Why are you helping us?" "Because he's my son." The words came out raw, stripped of pretense. "And I don't know how to be a father. I don't know how to be anything other than what I am. But I'll be damned if I let someone hurt him because of me." Yuna's eyes shimmered. "He asked me about you yesterday. If you were staying. What did you tell him?" "I said I didn't know." Minho looked at her. Really looked at her. At the woman who'd walked away from him 6 years ago and built a life strong enough to rival his own. At the mother who'd raised their son alone, who'd kept him safe from a world that would have devoured him. "I'm staying," he said finally. "For as long as it takes." Yuna nodded, then turned to go inside. "Yuna." She stopped. "That night," Minho said quietly. 6 years ago. Do you regret it?" Yuna looked back at him, her expression soft and sad. "Every day, and not at all." Then she was gone, leaving Minho alone on the balcony with the ghosts of choices he couldn't undo. The call came at 3 a.m. Minho was awake. He'd barely slept since Yuna and Jiho had entered his life, reviewing security footage from Yuna's office building when his phone lit up with an unknown number. He answered without hesitation. "Who is this?" "Kang Minho." The voice was smooth, cultured, and utterly cold. "I believe we have something to discuss." "Jung Taeyang." Minho's hand tightened on the phone. "How did you get this number?" "The same way I found out about your son." Taeyang's voice dripped with satisfaction. "You've been very careful, Minho. But everyone has weak spots. And yours just walked into a bank with a marriage certificate and a child who has your face." Minho's blood ran cold. "What do you want?" "A conversation, face to face. Just you and me." "No." "Then the boy dies." The words were delivered with casual brutality, as if discussing the weather. Minho's vision narrowed. "You touch him." "I won't have to," Taeyang interrupted. "There are a dozen ways to make a child disappear in this city. Car accidents, kidnappings, tragic illnesses. And you know as well as I do that once I put that kind of operation in motion, not even you can stop it." Minho forced himself to breathe, to think. "What's the conversation about?" "A trade. Her company for his life. Simple." "She'll never agree." Then make her. Taeyang's voice hardened. You have 48 hours to deliver the signed transfer documents. After that, I stopped being patient. The line went dead. Minho sat in the darkness, his mind racing through scenarios and outcomes with mechanical precision. Young Taeyang was a mid-level operator with delusions of grandeur. Dangerous, but not untouchable. Minho could have him eliminated within hours. But that would start a war. And wars had collateral damage. And Jiho was collateral. Minho couldn't afford to risk. He stood and walked to the guest bedroom where Yuna was sleeping. He knocked once, then opened the door without waiting for permission. Yuna bolted upright, her hand reaching instinctively for something under her pillow. A knife, Minho realized with grim approval. What's wrong? She demanded, her voice sharp with alarm. Young Taeyang called. He wants your company in exchange for Jiho's safety. Yuna went very still. No. Yuna, I said no. She threw back the covers and stood, her eyes blazing. That company is mine. I built it from nothing. I'm not handing it over to that bastard because he made a threat. This isn't about pride, Minho said coldly. This is about your son's life. And what happens after I give him the company? Yuna shot back. You think he stops there? He'll come back for more. He'll use Jiho as leverage every time he wants something. And we'll spend the rest of our lives being extorted by a man who sees our child as a bargaining chip. She was right. Minho knew she was right. But the alternative, calling Taeyang's bluff, carried risks he wasn't sure he could stomach. There's another option, Minho said quietly. Yuna crossed her arms. I'm listening. We make him think you're complying. Set up a meeting to sign the documents. And I end this before he has a chance to act. You mean kill him? Yes. Yuna's expression didn't change. And if something goes wrong? If he has people watching Jiho? If he's already set something in motion? He hasn't. Minho said it with more confidence than he felt. Taeyang is arrogant. He thinks he holds all the cards. He won't move until he's sure you're not cooperating. You don't know that. I know men like him. Minho stepped closer, his voice dropping. He wants your company because it makes him look powerful. But he wants you to surrender it even more. Because that proves he broke you. And men like that don't kill their toys before they've finished playing. Yuna's jaw clenched. You're asking me to bet my son's life on your assessment of a psychopath's ego. Yes. The word hung between them, brutal and honest. Yuna turned away, her hands shaking. I can't do this, Minho. I can't. Then give him the company. Minho's voice was flat. Sign the papers, walk away, and spend the rest of your life wondering when he'll come back for more. Yuna spun to face him, tears streaming down her face. I hate you for making me choose. I know. She wiped her eyes roughly. What do you need from me? Set up the meeting. Tell him you'll sign. And then let me do what I do best. Yuna stared at him for a long moment, her expression raw. Then she nodded. Okay. But if anything happens to Jiho, it won't, Minho said. I promise. It was the second promise he'd made in a week. And he intended to keep this one too. The next 40 hours were a masterclass in controlled chaos. Minho pulled every resource he had. Surveillance teams, informants, tech specialists who could track Taeyang's movements down to the second. Yuna played her part perfectly, setting up the meeting with just the right amount of reluctance to make Taeyang believe he'd won. Jiho, blessedly, remained unaware. Yuna kept him occupied with movies and games, her smile never wavering, even as Minho watched her hands shake every time she thought her son wasn't looking. On the second night, Minho found Jiho sitting on the couch, a drawing pad on his lap. What are you drawing? Minho asked, sitting down beside him. Jiho held up the paper. It was a crude but recognizable sketch of 3 figures. A tall man, a woman, and a small boy holding both their hands. It's us, Jiho said simply. A family. Minho's throat tightened. Is that what you want? A family? Jiho tilted his head, considering. I already have Mama, but I think I want you too, if you want to stay. I want to stay, Minho said, the words coming easier than he'd expected. Jiho smiled, a real, genuine smile that made him look like the 5-year-old he was instead of the too serious child who'd learned to be quiet. Can I ask you something? Jiho said. Anything. Are you going to hurt the bad man? Minho froze. What bad man? The one who's scaring Mama. Jiho's eyes were dark and knowing. I heard you talking. I'm not supposed to, but I did. Minho looked at his son, at this small person who was far too perceptive for his age. Yes, I'm going to stop him. Will you kill him? The question was asked with such innocent curiosity that it took Minho a moment to respond. Maybe, he said finally, because he'd never been good at lying. Would that scare you? Jiho thought about it. Mama says you do bad things sometimes, but that you're still my father. Your mother is very smart. I know. Jiho leaned against Minho's arm, a gesture of trust that made Minho's chest ache. I think you do bad things to protect people, like Mama and me. That's part of it, Minho admitted. Then I'm not scared. Jiho yawned, his small body relaxing. Because you're going to keep us safe. Minho wrapped an arm around his son, feeling the weight of that trust settle on his shoulders like armor. Yes, he murmured. I am. The meeting was set for a warehouse in Incheon, neutral territory, or as neutral as anything could be in their world. Minho arrived an hour early with his security team, sweeping every inch of the space for traps or surveillance. Taeyang would come with his own men, but Minho had the advantage. He knew this city better than anyone, and he'd spent the past 2 days mapping every escape route and contingency. Yuna arrived 30 minutes before the scheduled time, her expression calm, but her hands clenched white-knuckled around her briefcase. You don't have to be here, Minho said. Yes, I do. Yuna's voice was steady. If he thinks I'm hiding, he'll know something's wrong. Minho wanted to argue, but she was right. So he nodded and positioned himself where he could see every entrance, his hand resting lightly on the weapon concealed beneath his jacket. At exactly 8 p.m., Jung Taeyang arrived. He was younger than Minho had expected. Mid-30s, handsome in a polished way, dressed in an expensive suit that screamed new money. He walked in with 2 bodyguards flanking him, his smile wide and predatory. Ms. Han, he said, inclining his head to Yuna. And Mr. Kang, what an unexpected pleasure. Let's skip the pleasantries, Minho said coldly. You have what you wanted. Now leave her alone. Taeyang's smile widened. Of course, but first I'd like to see the documents. Yuna opened her briefcase and pulled out a stack of papers. Her hand didn't shake as she set them on the table between them. Taeyang picked them up, flipping through with casual interest. These look legitimate, but I think I'll have my lawyers review them before we finalize anything. That wasn't the deal, Yuna said. The deal, Taeyang said softly, is whatever I say it is. Minho moved. He crossed the space between them in 2 strides, his hand closing around Taeyang's throat before the bodyguards could react. Minho's gun appeared in his other hand, pressed against Taeyang's temple. Call them off, Minho said quietly, or I paint this warehouse with your brain. Taeyang's bodyguards hesitated, weapons drawn but uncertain. Do it, Taeyang choked out, his face going red. The bodyguards lowered their guns. Minho tightened his grip. You made a mistake coming after my family, and now you're going to pay for it. Kill me, Taeyang gasped, and you start a war you can't win. Try me. For a moment, Minho almost pulled the trigger. It would be easy, clean. 1 bullet, and the threat would be gone. But then he thought of Jiho asking if he was going to hurt the bad man. Of Yuna's face when she'd said she hated him for making her choose. Of the family he was trying to build from the ashes of his old life. Minho released Taeyang and stepped back. Take your men and leave. If I ever hear your name in connection with Yuna or Jiho again, I won't hesitate." Taeyang straightened his tie, his eyes blazing with fury and humiliation. "This isn't over." "Yes," Minho said coldly. "It is." Taeyang left, his bodyguards trailing behind him like wounded dogs. The moment they were gone, Yuna's legs gave out. Minho caught her before she hit the ground, holding her as she shook with silent sobs. "It's over," he murmured. "You're safe. Jiho's safe. You didn't kill him," Yuna whispered. "No." "Why?" Minho thought of his son's drawing, of 3 figures holding hands. "Because I'm trying to be better," he said quietly. "For him. For you. For the person I want to become." Yuna looked up at him, her eyes red but clear. "Do you think you can?" "I don't know," Minho admitted. "But I'm going to try." The apartment felt different when they returned. Jiho was asleep on the couch, curled up under a blanket with Minho's head of security watching over him like a protective wolf. The man stood when Minho and Yuna entered, relief clear on his face. "Everything go smoothly, sir?" "Smoothly enough," Minho said. "You can go. I'll take it from here." The security chief nodded and left without another word. Minho locked the door behind him and turned to find Yuna kneeling beside Jiho, her hand smoothing his hair back from his forehead with infinite gentleness. "He was worried about you," the security chief had said before leaving. "Kept asking when you'd be back." Minho's chest tightened. Yuna looked up at him, her expression soft. "We should put him to bed properly." Together, they lifted Jiho, Minho taking his shoulders, Yuna his legs, and carried him to his bedroom. The boy stirred but didn't wake, his small face peaceful in sleep. As Minho tucked the blanket around his son, Jiho's hand reached out and caught his sleeve. "Stay," he mumbled, half asleep. "Don't go." Minho froze. Yuna put a hand on his shoulder. "He's been asking that every night since we got here. He's afraid you'll disappear." The words hit like a physical blow. Minho sat down on the edge of the bed, and Jiho's grip on his sleeve loosened, but didn't let go. "I'm not going anywhere," Minho said quietly, though he wasn't sure if Jiho could even hear him. Yuna watched them for a moment, then slipped out of the room. Minho stayed until Jiho's breathing evened out into true sleep, his small hand finally releasing its hold. Then he stood and found Yuna in the kitchen, pouring 2 glasses of whiskey with shaking hands. "I thought I was going to lose him," she said without looking up. "When you grabbed Taeyang. When I thought you were going to kill him. I thought—" "I know," Minho said. Yuna handed him a glass, and they drank in silence. "What happens now?" she asked finally. "Now we figure out how to live," Minho said. "All of us. Together." Yuna's laugh was hollow. "You make it sound simple." "It's not." Minho set down his glass. "But I'm done pretending I can go back to who I was before. Before you. Before him. I built an empire on violence and fear, and I told myself that was enough. But it's not. Not anymore." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I want to be part of his life. Really part of it. Not just the man who shows up when there's danger." Minho's voice roughened. "I want to be his father. And I want—" He stopped, the words catching in his throat. "What?" Yuna pressed. "I want a chance with you," Minho admitted. "Not because of Jiho. Not because we're connected by blood or marriage certificates. But because when I look at you, I see someone who's stronger than I ever gave you credit for. Someone who built something real while I was building monuments to my own ego." Yuna's eyes filled with tears. "Minho, I know I don't deserve it," he continued. "I know I've done things that should disqualify me from any kind of happiness, but I'm asking anyway, because for the first time in my life, I want something more than power." Yuna was quiet for a long moment. Then she set down her glass and crossed the space between them. "I left 6 years ago because I was terrified of what you'd become," she said quietly. And I came back because I was even more terrified of raising our son alone. But in the past week, I've seen something different.
Maybe you're listening to this while doing something simple. Washing dishes, tidying up, trying to relax. And that's exactly why these stories work. When you unlock full access, you get 30 stories. Over 30 hours of audio with no interruptions. You press play, and the story just keeps going. If you want to continue right now, scan the QR code on your SC or tap the link in the pinned comment. What was never said continues there.
Not the monster everyone warned me about, but a man who's trying. Trying isn't enough. No, Yuna agreed, but it's a start. She reached up and touched his face, her palm warm against his cheek. Minho closed his eyes, allowing himself this moment of vulnerability. I can't promise I'll be good at this, he said. At being a father, a partner, a man who doesn't solve problems with violence. I'm not asking for perfection, Yuna said. I'm asking for effort. For honesty. For you to choose us over your empire when it matters. I will, Minho said, opening his eyes. I already have. Yuna studied his face, searching for the lie. But there was none. Okay, she said finally. Okay. They stood like that for a long moment, the weight of 6 years and all their unspoken regrets hanging between them. Then Yuna leaned up and kissed him. It wasn't the desperate, reckless kiss from 6 years ago. It was slower, more intentional, a promise instead of an escape. When they pulled apart, Minho rested his forehead against hers. I don't know how to do this. Neither do I, Yuna admitted. But we'll figure it out. Together. Together. The next morning, Minho woke to find Jiho standing beside the couch where he'd fallen asleep, staring at him with those dark, serious eyes. You stayed, Jiho said. I told you I would. Jiho climbed onto the couch and curled up against Minho's side. Are you staying forever? Minho wrapped an arm around his son. Yes. Even when there's no bad man? Even then. Jiho was quiet for a moment. Mama says you're going to live with us now. If that's okay with you. Jiho tilted his head back to look at Minho. Will you teach me things? What kind of things? Important things, like how to be brave and how to protect people. Minho's throat tightened. I can do that. And how to hold hands without being scared. Minho looked down at his son, at this small person who saw through all his armor to the man beneath. I'm still learning that one myself. Jiho's smile was small, but genuine. We can learn together. Yeah, Minho said softly. We can. 3 months later. The beach house in Busan was nothing like Minho's usual properties. It was small, cozy, filled with sunlight, and the sound of waves crashing against the shore. Jiho was running along the sand, his laughter carried on the ocean breeze. Yuna sat beside Minho on the deck, her hand resting on his arm. He's happy, she said. He is, Minho agreed. Are you? Minho looked at his son, at the woman beside him, at the life they were building from the wreckage of their pasts. I'm getting there, he said honestly. Yuna squeezed his arm. That's enough. And for the first time in his life, Kang Minho believed her. He'd built an empire on violence and fear. But this small family, this fragile happiness, this chance at redemption, was worth more than all the power in the world. Jiho ran back to them, sand covering his legs, his face bright with joy. Come swim. Minho stood, pulling Yuna to her feet. Come on. You hate swimming, Yuna said, laughing. I'm learning, Minho said. We all are. And together, they walked toward the ocean, a family forged not by coincidence or fate, but by choice, sacrifice, and the hard-won belief that even broken people could build something beautiful. The end.